All right, so in a Frankenstein for today. So where to even begin? All right, I'm not going to really have too many opening remarks today, just for the simple reason. Usually I'd give opening remarks and introducing a new text. Right? Well, we were introduced to Frankenstein last week, so the need for opening remarks isn't here as much. But to kind of sum up where we were, what happens in the novel, right? We get the whole account of the creature's backstory of what happens to him after Victor abandons him. Right, so we kind of get his whole history of childhood development showing up here. Right? His very rushed history of childhood development. So especially some of you guys who are interested in psychology and counseling and stuff like that, I'm sure you guys will have lots to say there about the monster's upbringing. Is he a monster because society made him that way, right? Or was he a monster because nature made him that way? The nature versus nurture questions will definitely come up again today. Then volume 3 is about the monster gives Frankenstein a condition. Hey, I need you to create me a mate. Right? I don't want to be going on this earth alone. Right? I need a companion. Well, then that raises a whole new set of ethics questions. Right? Should Frankenstein create this companion? Should if he does create it, what would happen? Would this new species of humans kind of rule over the earth, right? Because they are better, because it is a better human than humans. He's more like a superhuman. So would that create problems? Would they reproduce and create a whole new generation of monsters? These are all questions that he struggles with. Eventually he decides to be an ethical scientist, right? And decides not to be. Well, too little, too late, right? You know, as far as trying to do the right ethical thing. And then the whole rest of it leads up to the showdown, chases the monster all the way up to the Arctic Circle, where we get back up to where the letter guy is, right? And then we learn when Victor dies and the monster kills himself. Right? That's pretty much it. The monster plans to throw himself into the funeral pyre. That's pretty much what he plans to burn himself alive. Right? That's how the book ends. So pretty dark stuff. We'll actually unpack. Mary Shelley was actually making a reference to a typical suicide method that was often done in India at the time. We'll talk about that once we get to it. It's a pretty dark novel, right? It definitely doesn't end happily. It's for no one. And plus, all of Frankenstein's family gets killed. Right? The monster kills Elizabeth. The monster kills Clerval, his buddy. Right? And the dad just kind of dies of a broken heart after everybody else dies. So where to begin then? I'll just open the floor up for general comments. What did you guys think of the way the book ended? Did the book still hold your attention the further along it went? What's your final verdicts on Frankenstein?
I haven't got to finish it yet. I'm still working on it.
Right. How far are you, Tiffany?
I'm on the second chapter of the part 3.
Right. So you at least got the monster's backstory and all that. So that's good.
I thought it was great. I really, really liked the way that it ended, and I kind of liked just like the little short story of Walton finding a friend, and then ultimately He does. That's kind of, it wasn't funny, but it was ironic, I guess.
Right? Poor Walden needs a companion, right? He doesn't have one for long. Poor guy. Or maybe he wants more than that, as you guys mentioned last week.
Yeah, there's some text in there, something about like when Victor was upset, he was like, I wanted so bad to soothe him. I was like, that line was just too much. It's a telltale.
What about the rest of y'all? What's your final verdicts of the novel? Did it end in a way that surprised you? That it's definitely a completely different story than what you normally get with the films and stuff.
I want to finish it, honestly. Even though we're already doing the class and stuff, I'm probably gonna finish it tonight. Because it caught my attention. Especially like right where I'm at. They kept going from football and talking about Henry, and then like every time he switched it, each time he's talking about him. And it was kind of like, I don't know, like I didn't know if I could trust the narrator at first, but I was like, I'm gonna stick with it. Because anybody that's like that choppy usually ends up being good.
Right? You kind of cut out a little bit there, Irene. I didn't quite get everything you said there.
And toward the end of the passage, or where I'm at, not passage, but he started switching up football names. He was going from football and talking about Henry, but he's talking about the same person. And I didn't know, like, you know, that split second of what we learned so far about narrators. And I was like, can I trust them? I don't know. I'm going to finish it. So I was intrigued. So I want to finish it.
I thought the ending was fitting with the monster killing himself because Victor was his last hope. He was so lonely and he wanted a companion, and when Victor died, he had no chance of it. So I think that was the last straw.
Right?
I think it was like a good example of like what a trauma bond's like. Like if you're trauma bonded to someone, it's like people in toxic relationships, they can't get away from their abuser. It's like similar situation. Like they hated him, he hated him. Victor's sole purpose in life was to hunt him down and kill him. His sole purpose was to torment him. And once they were both gone, or once he was gone, he was like, yeah, I don't have any reason to live anymore. And it made a ton of sense. It was like, it wasn't one of those endings where you were like, that's dumb as hell. It was just, okay, yeah, I can see why that happened. And it was poetic. I liked it. I thought that him and Walton were going to form some type of friendship for a second. Had me thinking that Walton was going to take him under his wing and show people that he wasn't that bad. But then Walton remembered how bad he tormented Victor and was like, okay, now, and then he let him have it. I think that was kind of I was surprised in a sense too that he didn't snap and do something to him because he realized that he was Victor's friend. But then I thought, well, he knows Victor's already dead, so it would serve no purpose. And it brought me back to the thought of he's not really a awful person. He just has a strong hatred for Victor because of what he did. That's why he didn't kill anyone else. That's why he was like, I'm done.
Like that would be a more comedic way to end it, right? Walton and the monster was walking off. Like this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, right? That would be a cute way to end it, right? But
Be a good spinoff, good little short movie or a series or something. Walton and the monster.
Personally, I don't know. When I was reading it, I didn't know how it would end. Like, I just couldn't figure out in like my mind how it would end. And like I thought it would be similar to the movies and stuff. And it ended kind of completely different than what I thought, but I still think it was a good ending. Like it fitted everything.
what type of ending would you expect from things like the movies, Haley?
Something more dramatic, murderous, bloodier, something like that.
Right. Yeah, I actually just rewatched the 30s film this past week because I did that video I was telling you guys about with my colleague. And yeah, the way that the film ends, it's like the monster gets away, like the monster's unintelligent at all in the film. He gets away, he accidentally murders a little girl, right, with his strength, with his like brute strength. Then the town sort of gets together and riots and pretty much just like murders the monster in cold blood by burning down a windmill that he goes to. So completely different type of ending in the film compared to the book.
I felt so bad for him whenever he got shot. Whenever he helped that little girl that was in the river.
Right.
I felt so terrible for him. I was like, oh, this sucks so bad. Because like you ever try to do something nice and then like you end up, I guess, doing it the wrong way. It's kind of that same situation. Like you try to do something nice for somebody, but you screw it up worse, and then you're just stuck there with your own self-hate and the other person being like, why the hell did you do that? Yeah. And then this man got shot in the process.
Well, he certainly can't win here in this
No.
book, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, no good deed unpunished, because every time he does something, it like, pulse check, chill. Like every time, like he do something nice, he would get turned around and get punished for it.
Right. Yeah, he does seem to have a good conscience in a way, right? You know, he does want to do good, as we learn with the family part. We might as well transition into volume 2, right, with the family part to kind of get an idea for the monster here. So his whole account here is a really interesting part of the book, I think. Right, I told you guys last week about the mirror stage, right? The idea of the mirror stage in psychology. That's when a baby looks into the mirror for the first time, right? And that's when the baby comes to the conclusion that I'm a person, right? We kind of get that early in this with the monster looking into the lake, right, and seeing how horrific he looks, right? So we get that pretty early. But we get this whole account of how he sort of voyeuristically looks at this family from afar, right? He feels a connection to this family from afar and kind of watches their every move. He wants to make a connection with them. He learns language from watching the family talk, right? That's how he learns language. He happens to pick up a few books. Right, and learns language that way too. One of them being Paradise Lost by John Milton. Right, I teach Paradise Lost in a number of my other classes, but the Paradise Lost is a retelling of the Genesis story. Right, and it definitely, Paradise Lost is famous for kind of making the devil a sympathetic character in it. Right, the devil sort of invokes sympathy for himself here. Right? He's like, God's all-knowing, God's a tyrant, right? God created me to be this way, right? So he created me to be so prideful, right? So I don't know if you guys have ever heard the line, it's better to rule in hell than serve in heaven, right? That line comes from Paradise Lost. That's what the devil says about ruling in hell rather than serving in heaven. So the creature kind of relates to Satan here, right? He relates to Satan's plight in Paradise Lost because his creator has shunned him just as much as God supposedly shuns the devil in Paradise Lost. That's a way to read Paradise Lost. If you ever read it, like, you can choose not to read the devil sympathetically in it. But when this book was read by the Romantic poets and stuff at this time period, including Percy Shelley, Mary's husband, like a lot of these Romantic poets really like felt sympathy for the devil in that book. God kind of sets the devil up to fail, so to speak. So yeah, we get this whole backstory. He learns that, and that kind of frames his worldview. Once we get the part with him trying to introduce himself to the family, right? He's like, "Oh, the grandpa's blind, right? He can't tell how awful I look." So I'll try to convince him with my words that I'm okay. Right? Because it goes very bad. The monster's first ever social interaction, right? It's the definition of anxiety here, right? What happens to him? Right? He kind of clams up. It gets really ugly. So I don't know. What did you guys think of the monster's character development in volume 2 here, especially with relation to the nurture versus nature kind of thing?
I feel like that he didn't have anything to go by. I mean, you know, he was rejected by Victor, his creator, and he had no moral compass because he was never taught anything of good or bad. And then reading the book of Paradise Lost, I mean, that's the only thing that he really had that he could go off of, besides watching through the window of the interaction, you know, of the family. So he wasn't taught anything. So, I mean, he just kind of taught himself.
Right. Teaching, learning values of the world yourself, right? Rather than having someone to kind of steer you with morality and stuff, right? That does seem like a recipe for disaster.
I felt bad for the monster throughout the whole book. I just had sympathy for him. I don't think it's like if someone sits there and they tell you something over and over again, like they say that you're a liar, and no matter what you do, no matter how many times you're honest, and they keep on calling you a liar, well, you might as well just lie because that's what they see you as. I think it's like that. Everybody thought he was a monster, and he couldn't redeem himself, so he might as well be the monster.
That was kind of what I thought too. I sympathized for the monster the whole story because no matter how hard he tried to do good or whatever, he was always seen for what he looked like instead of how he acted. And so ultimately, the way that the society treated him caused him to be what he looked like, which was a monster.
I felt like the monster was like extremely intelligent because like you see him pick up things like pick up language, pick up reading. I even picked up how to use an axe and like tools to collect wood, and he picked that all up on his own. So I feel like, you know how we talked about like the body parts, like what happens if I feel like he took like somebody that was extremely intelligent's brain to make the monster.
I thought it was kind of cool how whenever he was basically spying on him, there's not really much other word to use, but he had this idea of he wasn't like like when you're a toddler, like if you're a small child or something, you want to be included in everything, but you want to be the center of attention. Like kids always want to be the center of attention. And you could tell I wrote my discussion post that you could tell from all of his deeds and the way he acted and the way he talked about the family that he didn't want to be the center of the story, that he just wanted to be included. He probably wouldn't have cared if he had to sit in the room in silence all day, as long as it was acknowledged that he was there present in the room. And that's what made me feel so bad for him, was that like he had no ill intention at all. Like he did all those phantom deeds. He, did nice things for him when they were away, and with no reward at all. He didn't even know how that was going to end. He didn't know if they were ever going to even find out that he was doing all those nice things. And ultimately, they only the blind dad. Did he tell the blind dad? I thought he did. I thought he said, the things that has been happening while you're away. I was the one that did it, but it made me feel really bad for him that he was going through all that to be included and not really be like a star. If you want to be a star of a show, he could have busted in there, like, hey, I'm normal. I just look funny. Like,
Right.
he was approaching it in a way that was with pure intentions. And it's like whenever that traumatic event of, oh God, they hate me happened, it was like people had those traumatic events in their life where you just flip the switch, and I think that set him off and kind of put him in the middle of things now. Like, okay, maybe I can find somebody else, or but he also had that doubt of, I'll never have social interaction again. And it kind of sucked too that he popped in on they were French, right? So
Yes.
he popped in on a French family in Germany, right?
Switzerland.
Popped in on a French family in Switzerland, picked up that native tongue. So then, like, they were his only hope at all. Like, I think it says that afterwards that he had no way of even asking for directions to get back to where he was going.
Kristen writes in the chat, I feel he lacked the guidance and love along with the way he was treated by mankind because of the way he looked. So kind of echoing what Taylor and Cassidy said a second ago, right? Or what Taylor and Ethan said, right? He looks the part, so that he must then act the part. Right? I think that is a good comment.
I think this book's like a true example of judging a book by its cover too, because he could have been used for so much good. If somebody would just flipped open the pages and read it, I mean, he had like superhuman strength and speed, and like, could you imagine all the crap he could have got done around town for people that they couldn't do because they were normal humans? He could have, lifted things that people couldn't lift. He could have cut down trees that people couldn't cut down. There was all kinds of good in him that nobody even got to pull out.
Again, it kind of goes back to the question, like, how ugly is this monster to be judged so harshly? Is this abomination of sorts? It raises the same question as last week, right? If the way that the monster looks in the films, right, would you really be that repulsed? So it kind of goes along with, hey, he must look really unnatural, right, to be judged this harshly.
Well, also back then when he was written, they had no way to view other parts of the world, so they don't know. To them he was a stranger, but they could have been other people that looked like him. They don't know, but they just treated him awful because they didn't fit. He didn't fit what their little community was. So that's what also caught me too.
Right, so he doesn't know how to take part in a community. That's pretty much what you're saying here, Irene.
That the community didn't know how to take part with him.
Right.
Because he looked so different. They didn't understand that just because he looked different didn't mean he couldn't be like him.
Yeah, this novel raises questions about things even like disabilities today, right? You can kind of read this novel through the lens of disability. right? Because if someone is different in a way, right? Well, oftentimes they're shunned, right, or looked down on, or thought of differently, right, or treated differently, maybe in a condescending way. I mean, if the monster isn't disabled in a physical sense, right, or even a mental sense, but just with his appearance, right, you can kind of read them. You can kind of read how society treats the disabled, right, kind of through this book. So this is definitely a lens that we can take a look at the novel in. Right? How much are disabled, especially disabled bodies, right? How much is that kind of thing looked on by society? How are they treated differently? How are they shunned?
I mean, think of Stephen Hawking, man. What if he's in a gas station? He just rolled up and started tapping on his little keypad and like trying to talk to you. Like a lot of people, there's a lot of mean people out there that'll be like, dude, what the hell? Like, get away from me. But he's like one of the smartest people to ever live. And because somebody gave him a chance.
Right.
But I mean, he's all, distorted and discorded, and like he can't speak. He can move his eyes around and stuff, but like he was definitely physically disabled. But what was on the inside was so much more important than what was on the outside. We got one of the greatest minds to ever think from Stephen Hawking. But if you saw a dude like that in a gas station here in West Virginia or Kentucky, you'd be like some people would be disgusted, honestly. Like it's just some people have no filter, no kind of, thought process of, okay, they're just a little bit different than me. Maybe I should treat them with respect and hear what they got to say.
Yeah, I mean, we can extend this to any type of disability. Like if you think about like deaf people, for instance, think about how many people like shout at the deaf person, right? So the way that the monster's treated is very akin to that type of thing even today.
I thought that the grandfather was so nice too. Like before the kids came back home, I thought he was so sweet to him and kind. And then like it showed. I mean, it really does show how hideous he must have been that the kids ruined that moment, because you would think after having the conversation and stuff with him that he'd be like, "Oh, slow down. I don't care what he looks like." But from their reaction, he could tell that the monster needed to get the hell out of his house. Then they moved. So like that shows how scared they really were. I mean, they dipped out. They left. And took 3 months rent away from him. I wouldn't have done that. I stayed in a crack apartment before that. I didn't for like 2 months just to collect rent. You know what I mean?
Right. We're getting the hell out of Dodge really quick here.
At that point, I didn't think that they captured the true severity of how the monster should have felt at that time, because that was all he had. That was all he clung to, and then they just left him. The grandfather didn't stand up for him. The people they thought he could look to as family left him, and I think that's what really sent him over. And then that was like the climax, and then like after everything since then is just what drove him to be the way he is, and that's when he finally realized that he wanted a companion. He wanted a wife.
I feel like
think
the,
Go
I feel
ahead,
like the whole cabin thing was like, I don't really like feel that like those people were that judgmental, because like you have like a gigantic man in your house that you never known before, and you walk in on him, like how are you supposed to react to that, really?
Right. That's true. I think what makes it worse for him too is that he knew their whole story. Like Irene said, like they probably didn't understand the severity of how bad they were hurting him, because he was invested. You know, like he knew everything about them. He knew their background, where they came from, why the Arabian was there, knew all that stuff, and it just they probably didn't know. I mean, the father probably got some idea that he probably knew much more than what he thought he did, and I'd like to hear his thoughts, or I wonder what he thought or what he told the children after they left. But I mean, like Ethan said, where would you be at with your family? You know, like you figure out some dude's been peeking through your window for the past, however long, and like he knows your whole life story now, and then you walk in and just stand there talking to your blind dad. I'd be like, I'd probably have the same reaction. I'd probably have the same reaction if it wasn't a monster.
Yeah, keep in mind too, the dad's disabled, right? So the dad can't really defend himself. So I can see why that would be a point of contention here, to build on what Ethan just said. Yeah, it is slightly creepy. Right? It is slightly creepy that this monster just like watches their every move, right? Knows everything about them. Right? How would any of you react? Like if you found out like you had a stalker, right? Who was stalking your every move, right? Like that. It's a pressure in a way, right? Like love me or else. Right? It is strange.
The worst part is the monster probably has no idea because, he has never been around anybody, so he has no like mannerisms whatsoever. So he probably don't even know he's being a creep.
Right? He has no filter, right? These are the very first people he's talked to. So all he knows about the world is through books. It's like that song, right? That by the Police, right? Every breath you take, I'll be watching you, right? That's kind of what happens. That's kind of what happens here. That song is famously creepy, by the way. They play it like it's a love song, but it's very creepy. You guys know the song. So yeah, I guess this kind of segues us over to the other ethical question. Does Victor owe the monster a responsibility to help him have a good life? Right? Doesn't Victor owe that monster that? Right? Should Victor have created the companion for him? I'll start out with that broad question, and then we'll dive into specific questions as we go. What did you guys think? Do you guys think he should have made this female monster for him?
In ways, I think he should have, and in ways, I think he shouldn't have. Like, I mean, if you're gonna create something, don't like. It's almost like having a baby and then leaving it by itself. Like, if you're gonna create something, at least be responsible for it, or give it to somebody else to take care of. But at the same time, he could, like he was thinking, they could have bred and made a superior race or superior species, and then that wouldn't end good either.
I don't think he should have, but I also do think that he did owe it to him from the beginning to make him have a good life. But at that point, after he abandoned him, I don't think he should have made him a man. I think he's a bad person for abandoning him in the get-go.
Right. So you think his second decision was right then, right? To not create the female monster.
I'm kind of a selfish person, so I would have created the monster. I would have done it. They would have made like some kind of superior race, just like generations down the road. Like, get away from me and my family, man. That was the only out. I mean, he couldn't kill him. The thing would have torn him apart. And I think it was his pride that was stopping him from. He gave all those examples as to why he shouldn't do it. Like, oh, they'd wreak havoc, they'd go murder. I think it was his pride. I think it was the fact that he had already took so much away from him He's like, deep down, he didn't want to for him. He wanted him to suffer as much as he had. But in the long run of things, they both got screwed.
Right? That's definitely an interesting way to read it, Colton. Like the reason when he chooses to stop is when he kind of sees the monster peeping in through the window. Right, the monster kind of goes in this creepy smile. Right, at that point he's like, "Screw this! Right? I'm not going to do this." Right, you could definitely kind of read that through his ego. Right, the reason why that, like the monster says, I'm now the master, right? You're now the servant. Right? So for somebody who had an ego big enough to create life, right? And you can definitely kind of see where that would rub Victor the wrong way.
You can also tell he's got a massive sense of pride and ego too. Is like when he goes, what was he doing whenever he first met the monster and the monster started telling him the story? What was his reason for going up on the mountain? I couldn't remember. But anyways, when he first meets him again, he berates him with "get away from me, you devil, you're trash." Like he just goes off on him. And most people, myself including, I would have either darted or just went head to head and tried to kill him. I wouldn't have had words. I wouldn't have talked to him and told him how big of a piece of trash he was. I would have had an end game, and that would have been to either run or to kill him. But I think his pride showed a lot whenever he sat there and basically argued with him. And in a sense, he argued with him for months. They didn't speak, but it was just constant back and forth, like it was some kind of game between the two of them.
Yeah, but it was ego too, right? He made the monster wait so long, right? He decides to go on this grand tour of like England, right? It makes the monster kind of like wait for like 6 months before he even starts, right? So you can kind of see why the monster will be ticked off about that.
Yeah, I mean, I get ticked off whenever I see somebody not working on my car in a shop when it's supposed to be getting an oil change. Like my car
Right.
got here before theirs. Or when somebody gets their food before you in a restaurant, like, what the hell? And then this dude's supposed to be creating a mate for this guy that's alone. I'd imagine he'd be upset.
Plus saying that he already started on it and then he's not going to finish it. That would put me in a full blown rage too. I don't even think I'd be able to hold back.
Yeah, when I was reading it, I thought like the monster was going to kill him like right there. Like I never did understand why the monster dashed away. But then like as I read it more, like the monster ended up putting Victor in the same situation that Victor left him in, like alone.
Right? Definitely poetic justice that way, right? If you just killed Victor, right, is there a fate worse than death? Right? And what do you guys think about the argument that they would go off and create a whole new race of monsters, right? That would perhaps domineer over humanity. Do you think that was a weak argument that Victor posited? Did you find it to be plausible? I mean, the female monster would be created from death too, right? So would she even be able to reproduce, right? In a natural way, a creature created unnaturally, could she procreate in a natural way? I guess that's a strange question to ask, but I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I think that argument came in too soon because I don't think he actually realized what he was thinking about them going off and, making a whole colony of monsters. They're made out of dead. I mean, that's all there is to it. They're made out of dead. I don't know how that would even
Right.
work anatomies.
Yeah, I think it is a long shot for sure. I mean, eventually, yeah, they might get to the point that we're like, yeah, we want a kid. You know, if his intentions were true, if he was really going to run away and escape from the human eye like he said he was. But then again, you got to remind yourself that he's obviously highly, highly intelligent. If he's learned what he has in the span of a couple of years, I mean, who's to say that he wouldn't start going and putting dead bodies together and, you know, animate them just like Victor would do to him and his mate, and the mate would be the only thing he needed to secure his plan, like a helper, somebody to help rule. But then again, it made me wonder why he didn't go do it himself in the first place. Like why he didn't go create a mate himself. If he maybe that should have been his goal all along. That probably would have been a smarter idea than to do what he did. Because I think he was smart enough too.
Maybe he needed to watch him do it one
Yeah,
time.
that could have been the reason that he was having him do it. That's a good argument. You know, maybe that was going to be his teaching process. Like he was going to learn all of it right there, and then.
And that's part of why Victor aborts the female monster, right? Because the monster is watching him do it. So how much would the monster be able to emulate that? Probably successfully, right? Just because we do know the monster is very intelligent that way.
I mean, think about it this way. If the monster did learn how to create another one and Victor does something to tick the monster off, he might go and create more just to tick Victor off, to get revenge on Victor for whatever Victor did, or for, Victor leaving him alone for that many years.
Right?
That's all I'm saying. I think he done it just to torment Victor. I think the monster had the intelligence to actually do it, but I think he actually wanted to, hold Victor accountable for making him suffer. He wanted Victor to suffer like he did. So he's gonna make Victor make as many monsters as he thinks fit.
Thinking of it on a cosmic scale, would it have been wrong though? Like if there would have been a superior race born from him and his mate? Like if you just think of it in the sense that we're just trying to protect our pack, just like a den of rattlesnakes would out in the woods if you came walking by. If he would have created it, and then they would have created a massive race of these same things, and then they would have overthrown humanity, and then you have a superior race that might be aesthetically unpleasing, but can now survive in extreme heat, can survive in extreme cold, is very strong, is very fast, is like the apex predator. Maybe they were meant to be at the top of the food chain. On a cosmic scale, would it have been wrong for that to happen? It might have been selfish. It might have been Victor just trying to save his race, like the selfishness of, okay, we're on top now. We don't need that to happen, but it might have been better, honestly. He seemed a lot more understanding when he talked about hearing about war and government and crimes. He completely turned a blind eye to all that at first. The only reason he did bad things was because of vengeance. It wasn't because he had any interest in being being a monster. It was because he was created to be one after all that happened to him. So, maybe his race or his species would have been a lot better than ours.
But that could have just been the one monster too. If he created another one, it could have been evil and wanted violence.
How bad would it have sucked if he would have made a wife and then she hated him? She opened her eyes. She's like, "God, you're hideous." And he's like, "Oh my God, you're hideous too." And then they just run off, and then you got two of them just running around wreaking havoc.
Yeah, I was getting ready to raise that point, Colton. would it have been ethical to have created this female monster knowing that, right? Because she would be a human being too. Right? So you're creating a human being as almost a slave in this case, right? You're going to be this thing's companion, right? No choice in the matter. Right? You're created to be this companion. Of course, you guys might know in the Genesis story, we have Adam and Eve, right? But the story goes beyond the apocryphal stories state, right, that God actually created a female companion for Adam named Lilith, right, who rejected Adam, right? So Eve was the second woman that God created, right? Have you guys heard that story before? Have you heard that, Colton? I know you're well read on these subjects.
I've heard it, but I haven't like given it any ground, I guess, like to actually remember the story. But
Yeah, that's
makes sense. I mean, if you think about it in the sense that if you believe in soulmates and believe in love, and that we're made for one person, then you plop somebody down in front of somebody and you're like, it's yours. You're not always gonna be like, oh, thank you so much for making me his wife, or making me, making her my wife. You're gonna be like, okay, I don't like her. And that could have definitely happened with the monster. She could have woke up and chose absolute violence that day if he would have made her. Like, just woke up, snapped his neck, took off running, and been gone. You don't know I guess you don't know what you're getting yourself into. But that's the problem with creating something superior to yourself, like he did. Like, it would have been all fun and games if he would have made Cujo. Like, if he would have put a dog together, that he could have just got a pitchfork and stabbed it or something. But I mean, he ended up accidentally making a human that was way smarter than him, and he was playing chess while Victor was playing checkers.
right. Playing 3D chess.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What are the rest of y'all, especially you ladies in the class, right? What do y'all think about this question? Right? Is it wrong to be like, hey, you're going to marry this guy, right? No choice. You're made to be this guy's companion, right? It seems a little messed up, does it not?
Yeah, I think Holton hit it. It'd be like she'd wake up and just go completely postal. I mean, there's always that chance she'd rip him to shreds and then turn around and rip the monster to shreds, and then she'd be alone, and then it'd be a vicious cycle. So I'm going with that Victor. I don't know. I think he could have went a different way about it than just ripping it apart while the monster was staring at him, but I can understand why he did it.
Yeah, I think the whole story, I just wanted to, like, if I could have talked to Victor in the story, I would have been like, why don't you just sit down and talk to him? Like, tell him your concerns, talk to him in a orderly manner, act like he's a human being as well. But then, the thought pops in the back of your head every single time he killed his little brother. Like, you can't get rid of that. That's something you can't wipe the slate clean on. It don't matter. Looking from the outside in, yeah, like in my discussion post, I talked about how we couldn't judge him the same that we would judge anyone else. But like, you kind of want to shake Victor and be like, just listen to him and, discuss it with him and tell him like, hey, this might turn out bad. This is why we shouldn't do it.
I should mention in a lot of pop culture adaptations of Frankenstein, like the Bride of Frankenstein is actually usually created as like this beautiful woman, right? Victor learns his mistakes from the first creation, creates this like beautiful woman. Right? So in the sort of fictional spins on it, she usually does reject the creature, going all the way back to like the 30s version, the Bride of Frankenstein. She usually does reject them in the sort of popular culture media versions. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. Just a state of fact, right? She usually does reject them in these versions. Right, I think in the 30s one, if I recall, the bride is actually like the creature gets mad because she does reject them, so then the creature like kills her. Right, I think that's what happens in the 30s version. I'd have to rewatch it. I'm pretty sure that's what happens. Yeah, I agree, Colton. The hair is pretty awesome in the 30s. 30s.
Is that where the hair is like this?
Yeah.
It has the white.
She's
Yeah,
got
it's
that
like-
dope silver streak through it.
Yeah.
So cool.
Now let me see. I'll pull the picture up and share it. Yeah, she's got a heck of a hairdo here. Let's see. Yeah, that's her right here, right? She's got the puffy hair going. And compared to the bolts in the neck of the male monster and stuff, right? She's got it going on. Yeah, here's the scene where they're kind of interacting in the film. See how she repulsed she is by him here, right? Yeah, it's definitely an ethical quandary, right? It even does make you think about religion, right? Like God created Eve to be Adam's companion, right? What was that? Right? Was that the right call? I told you the Lilith story. So I'm pretty sure that in Judaism, that's actually seen as fact. I think that's just something they cut out for Christianity. I'm pretty sure Judaism, that's fact. I'm pretty sure that's in the Torah. I might be wrong.
Protestants have a strong need for everything to be perfect and right. So I
Right.
could see why they would want to leave the omnipotence away from, away from God. But I don't have a problem with it. Like that's been my outlook on it always, is like, if God is omnipotent, how did he become omnipotent? Like, how did he become all knowing and all seeing? I mean, you could just go with the simple, boring answer of he just is, or you could go with the trial and error answer. And now he's gotten to the point to where he does know everything. And I think that's a lot cooler answer. It's just like, if you want to believe in aliens, it's so much cooler than being like, no, we're the only ones. That's it. It's done. It's like, why not open your mind up that it doesn't take away from the practice or the teachings or the preachings, it just makes things a little less prideful. So I think it makes more sense.
I mean, we're supposedly made in his image and we make mistakes all the time. So
Yeah, not every mistake is a bad one. That's
Yeah.
a big thing too. You know what I mean? Like,
perspective.
yeah, like there's mistakes that I make every day that teach me something way better, that my mistakes don't cause any harm or do anyone bad. It's just like, I could have done that better. And it's a teaching, So maybe like in the movie, that would have been a better idea for Victor, is to go back through all of his, right? Because I mean, he wrote everything down. He recorded everything that he did. Go back through, figure out what he did wrong, and perfect it this time. And then he's got his beginning creation that's, wild and wonderful, and then he's got the other one that's perfect and beautiful, and there's balance.
Y'all was connecting that to like religion and like y'all. So you talking about the Adam and Eve story, and like that's really where sin came from, was Adam and Eve eating the apple and becoming having knowledge of what they were doing. So really, if you think about it, Frankenstein, like the monster, really didn't start to murder and do these bad things until he gained the knowledge and the things that he knew in the hut. And before that, he never did anything. So that's another analogy you can take back to religion.
Right? The limits of knowledge, right? How far should we take knowledge? If the creature would have lived on like a commune away from the rest of humanity and been treated differently, right? Would he have turned into this violent murderer? Right? Probably not.
He wasn't even killing animals for food. He was eating berries.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that shows there that he's not violent. He saw plenty of living creatures out in the woods where he was staying at, I'm sure, and didn't have any intention of harming them. And then, humans, we slaughter stuff every day just because it tastes good. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm a vegetarian. Like, I'm never going to quit eating meat, I promise. But he was probably in his heart a lot less harmful than what we are. It's because he didn't know all the pleasures of being bad, I guess. He didn't know what vengeance would bring to you after somebody did you wrong. It's satisfying when you get revenge on somebody. You can't say it's not most of the time. Like, it's a simple fact of being. And I think he become more human the more he was around him, the more he watched him. Whenever he started out, he was a fresh slate. He could have been what his purpose was. Like, he could have fulfilled his purpose if it wouldn't have been for the interference of humanity.
So we seem to be going along the lines of his lack of nurture is what caused all this. But I raised the question in general, right? Are some people just born bad? Right? They get the good nurturing and stuff, but they still just end up bad. I mean, maybe not the monster here in the story, but are some people just born bad?
I don't feel like that they are. I don't feel like anybody's actually born bad. I feel like that's definitely a behavior that's learned. And if it's not something that's learned, it's an emotion that they don't know how to cope with, and they don't know how to come across with it correctly to, they don't have any coping mechanisms. But no, I don't believe that people are born bad.
I don't know how I feel about this because I was on TikTok the other day and I was scrolling through and a video popped up of this mom and she was crying and she was real upset and she was just telling her story. She was talking about her son who was like 7 or 8 years old and she had 2 older kids who were already raised. But ever since he was a baby, he was extremely violent. And by the age of 4 years old, he had killed one of their household pets. And this obviously wasn't taught behavior. He just was inherently violent.
I think everyone has the opportunity to be bad or good, and that your environment influences that completely. Like, some people may need a very, very strong nudge in the right direction. Some people might need to be roped around the neck and pulled in the right direction. But I think everybody has the opportunity to be good and everyone has the opportunity to be bad. And then some people we give up on them. Just like he gave up on Frankenstein or on his monster. Frankenstein gave up on his monster. But I don't think anybody's born like a piece of, they might be born worse, but there's still as much good uncovered as there is bad that has surfaced, I guess is the best way to put it.
What about people who are like psychopaths and stuff?
You know, like Ted Bundy or someone like
Yeah.
that.
I think that. Well, I mean, I think when you get to a point like where Ted Bundy was at, I think that you're too far gone. But from the beginning,
Do we freeze here? Am I frozen?
the internet ain't so good up there in the Northern Lights, is it?
It must not be, no.
No, but I think that some people just need a lot more help. And I think that the better we get with, discovering how to help those people, the less you're going to see that. But, the way our society is right now, it's like, so overrun with thousands and thousands of other problems that we're never going to focus on that. That's what's sad. But I think everybody has the same amount of good that they have bad. I think it's just some is more surface because of the sickness that they have. And I think if you could find a way to defeat that sickness, then you would find that there is just as much good underneath. But that's all philosophy. I think it's something you can't really put on paper and say that it's a fact.
I know this discussion's making me think of the Halloween films, right? Michael Myers, the character Michael Myers. But in the original film, he's posited as being like he's just the epitome of evil. Right? He's evil epitomized as a human being. Right. Whereas when they remade it, when Rob Zombie remade him, right? They show him becoming a monster through nurture. And so that franchise has done that in two different ways. Any of you guys like those movies?
I love the Rob Zombie one.
I
You
hate
like
Rob.
I watched them years ago, but I've literally not watched a scary movie in 13 years.
Did you say you hate? Was it Ethan? Did you say you hated Rob Zombie's version?
Yeah, I didn't like the Rob Zombie version. I like the whole he was just evil in general. Like I didn't like the whole background. I didn't want to know all that. I liked seeing him as just an evil person.
I didn't like the kid that played him. I'll say that. I didn't like that little kid. Just something about his face. I just want to punch him in the face, but I don't know.
Greasy hair, right?
Yeah, it's like that kid at school. Which I mean, maybe I'm one of the reasons people are like that because like you look at him, it's like that kid at school that nobody wants to talk to, and like maybe that's why he's the way he is. But he didn't kill the baby, So like getting back to what you were saying, there's I think there's still some good underneath all that, dirt that's piled on him. He didn't kill that baby. The baby didn't do anything to him. Baby didn't provoke him. He only went after everyone that made his life hell. Just like the monster in Frankenstein didn't really go after just whoever. He did the things he did to torture Victor, and that's it. It wasn't because he wanted to wreak havoc. I mean, he could have killed so many people along the way. He was around thousands of people, I'm sure, in the story. And he could have just went around snapping necks and leaving them where they lay. But he didn't.
That's kind of what I mentioned in my discussion post too. All these villagers would attack him, and even the family, the son attacked him and whatnot. And he could have just as easily hurt them, but he didn't. He didn't have a reason to.
Right. Yeah, well, let's segue into talking about the ending, right? Especially with the suicide. Right. We alluded to that at the beginning of class. Some of you guys thought that was a nice way to end it. Let me see here. I forget the exact. I should have done some more, refresh myself on this before class. But oh yeah, I have it marked in my book. It's called. Let me see. One sec. In Hinduism, there's a form of suicide. I think it's called jate. I'll double check. I'll get back to you after class. But that's a means of suicide in which you literally burn yourself to death. Right? You jump into the funeral pyre and burn yourself to death. And like you guys might know that from the famous Vietnam photo. You guys might know the Vietnam photo where the Buddhist priest burns himself alive, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen that in history class before, but yeah. So there's a colonial spin here on the story, because the guys have to remember that the British were some of the largest colonizers in history. Right? They colonized all these peoples in the Eastern world, including India around this time. So they looked at these practices like this and kind of like made them, I don't know, whenever we deal with things like colonization and literature, like they usually make them seem like simpletons, right? Or it's an exotic culture, right? That they do, and they look at it as fascinating, right? That they do these things. So it's interesting that they give the monster a very like Eastern style death here, as far as the way that he actually kills himself, like sort of jumping into the flame. He's going to jump into flames. So I just wanted to bring that up. That's something that doesn't show up a lot in American novels, right? Because Americans have never really been colonizers. We have been, but not to the same extent that England has. So whenever England has always had a big superiority complex. Right? They think they're better than everybody else, right? Them and their tea, right? But whenever they look at people like from India, right, they do view them this way. So it's curious that Shelley gives the monster that death. Usually it's done. You think of suicide, right? We have a negative connotation, but over there, not necessarily, right? Sometimes that's seen as like a spiritual way towards like spiritual enlightenment and stuff. So Hinduism is a hard religion to explain. I'll just say that, right? It's a very difficult religion to explain in that regard. But it's almost like he comes to like the sense of nirvana, right? Right? He no longer does have a point of living. So it's definitely a different way to look at death than Christianity, right? Where suicide is the worst thing you can do. Right? That's kind of an unforgivable sin. So I don't know. What do you guys think of all that?
I don't know, I think it's a lot more honorable whenever it's something that in a situation like his where he really truly didn't have a purpose left. Like it's just like the Japanese warriors whenever they committed their whole life to being samurai fighters, and whenever they were dishonored and they had been beaten or something, they'd stab themselves in the stomach with a sword. So I mean, yeah, like if that's your whole life and his whole life was tormenting Victor, yeah, whatever. But as you know, there's certain like somebody here always has something to live for. You know, I like fast food too much to kill myself. Like, yeah, like, but somebody in his situation, yeah, it's poetic for sure, and it's honorable. Because what else could he have done? He really like you hear people say that are depressed and want to commit suicide, like I have nothing else. And yeah, it might seem like that, but it's not true. But somebody like the monster really didn't have anything else. Nobody was going to accept him. He could have went off and roamed through the woods for the rest.
Did my internet spaz out again? I think so. There we are. There we are. It's my wife watching Netflix back in the other room, right? That's what I blame her for this. So, but yeah, as Colton, you were talking about purpose of life. Right? Is there always a purpose? Like, is that ever an answer? Right? I guess that's a question that the novel asks. Could he have, like, if you think about like everybody on earth has a purpose, right? Could he have lived a life in a peaceful way? Could he have found a purpose and a meaning for his life? Do you guys think? Or do you think he gave up too soon? What do you, I guess this depends on your worldview on suicide, right? But what do you think? Or you guys all feel like it was the right thing to do in this case?
Well, if his main goal was to unleash an anger that he had toward Victor, and Victor was gone, then probably, yeah, be for him for what he did. But for like an average person, I mean, he was above average intelligence, but he didn't look like everybody else, so he's just gonna be exiled anyway. Nobody wanted him. Nobody wanted to be around him. He was just he was shunned. It was all because of Victor. So there would have been nothing like him.
Right. Well, arguably, right, he could have chosen to lead a better life, right? Maybe he could have like done noble deeds for people, just like he did for the family or something, right? Without wanting anything in return. Maybe he could have done something like that, but again, that's kind of harsh too, right?
I think it goes back to the fact that you can't judge him for anything that he does in the story, period. That's my solid standpoint on the whole story, is because he's not a human. Like I said in my discussion post, you can't judge him for the murders. You can't judge him for his acts of kindness either, really. It's just so hard to wrap your mind around it because he's not one of us. Yeah. So anything that he does is going to be like comparing apples to oranges, or like an apple to a pear. I don't know, like something closer to an apple than an orange, but it's not the same as comparing like his suicide to a human suicide, I guess, because they're not the same at all.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it, right? Does he have to follow the rules that all the rest of us do, right? Because he is singularly alone on Earth. Yeah, the Eastern spin on this, right? I was talking about Hinduism. The Hindu, compared to the Western world, where we value each individual, the Eastern world tends to look at things through more of a sense of collectiveness and community, right, rather than individuality. right? So if you want to kind of put a spin on it that way, right, he doesn't belong within the world, right? So in order for the world to be whole again, right, he has to do it. So if you want to look at it through that type of lens too, that would lend towards that interpretation. Have any of you guys learned about Hinduism or Buddhism in maybe a religion class or anything here?
I
I
know a
did
little bit.
way back in like 6th, 7th grade, but I don't remember.
Right. Yeah, it's a fascinating religion. Right. It's a fascinating religion. Like I could wax poetic about like different things that they believe compared to us, things that they have in common with us too. Right. Like it's a pretty cool religion.
I think Buddhism's super cool. I love learning about Buddhism. I think a ton of their practices are incredibly beneficial, honestly. Like their outlook on things, and the way that they view society and the way that they view other human beings and their meditation practices. Like I think all that stuff's very, very beneficial. But I always tie everything back to Star Wars because I'm obsessed with Star Wars. But it got me thinking, like we were talking about, the monster kind of fulfilling his purpose and then committing suicide. It's like whenever balance is brought to the Force in Star Wars, you always see the person who brought balance to the Force fade away. It's like, you know, anytime a Jedi was killed, they just floated away. And it's like when Kylo Ren at the end brought Rey back to life, he just vanished. He went to be with the Force. It's not suicide, but it's a sense of he did what he was supposed to do and now he's gone. Think of it that way.
Star Wars is famously modeled on the Chinese religion, Taoism, right? So that's another cool religion.
Yeah, my brother-in-law told me that whenever George Lucas started writing all of them, that he read a book, and I can't remember who wrote the book. Josh told me the other day, but I forgot. And it's this big, thick book, and it's collectively all of the practices of every religion and their, I guess their thesis.
The book's called A Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell.
There you go. And he kind of like merged a ton of religions together, but like the one you said, the Chinese religion was the one that kind of, because there's a ton of religions that have similarities. We all share some things with each other, but ultimately, if you create your own religion for a story, one's going to prevail over all the others, and you're going to have more practices and styles of that religion ingrained in the religion that you've created in that story. But I always thought that the Jedi religion was like super, super cool. Like it's what made me kind of appreciate Buddhism a little bit, like that sense of like everything being connected. And the Force has that theory that the Force is everything. I always thought that was really neat. I thought that was a cool idea.
Yeah, it's famously difficult for a Christian missionary to convert a Hindu person to Christianity, just because Hinduism kind of is a religion that absorbs all other religions. Like they think that there's the great God is called the Brahman. So each sort of manifestation of God on earth is just a manifestation of the Brahman. So whether it's the Buddha or Jesus Christ, right, or the Prophet Muhammad, right, they claim they lay siege to all the religions, right, because they say that's the same God showing up on earth over and over and over again to lay the same message every time. So it's famously hard to convert a Hindu person to Christianity, right? Because they're like, yeah, right, that's our God showing up on earth.
Like, what am I doing wrong? Like,
right.
I agree with everything you're saying. I just agree with all of them too.
Right.
Yeah. I could see why that if you grew up as in that religion, I could see why that would be difficult to change your ideology. It'd definitely be really, really because a lot of us around here are stubborn Christians. Like we don't want to hear anybody else's side of the deal. We only want to hear it. We're like, no, don't talk to me about it. So I couldn't imagine believing that everything's right. I mean, they're almost universalists then, right? In a sense, aside from the atheists and agnostics, they would agree that probably everybody's pretty sound in a sense. It's probably why they're so peaceful.
Right? They're like, do unto others as you would want done to yourself, right? Well, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds good. That's in our book too, right? So, if you guys still need to do some of your general studies classes, I would say to take a world religion class, just because you'll learn a lot about the world in one. So I don't know, any final thoughts or threads that we haven't talked about with Frankenstein here before we close it out?
Did anybody else get really confused at why he thought that the monster was going to kill him instead of his wife? Like he was thinking the whole time that he was going to kill him on the wedding night.
I was kind of lost about that because, like, if he was going to kill him on the wedding night, he would have done did it.
No.
And
Like, what's the point? I mean, he was thinking that he was waiting until the wedding to make it special or something.
I think it was kind of like him being a coward, kind of like you said before. He was prideful, and I think he was being a coward in a way, leaving his wife alone.
Yeah. And he kept talking about the wedding night he's going to murder me. That's what he's going to do. He's going to take me away from Elizabeth. I was like, geez, man, like selfish, ain't you? Like you're not worried about your wife's well-being as much as your own at this point. Like he knew that he was tormenting him by killing everyone around him, and then he still had the idea that he was the one that was going to be murdered on his wedding night, not his wife. Like that was to me like a gimme.
I didn't understand why he didn't tell his wife about it.
Yeah, he was definitely ate up with some weird demons to not be able to just be like, hey, listen, there's this freakazoid that I created. And he's probably going to murder us, and he can follow us everywhere we go. So we probably just need to lock ourselves in a basement. Like that's a major amount of pride.
Yeah, his dream from earlier in the book kind of comes true, right? Because she dies on the wedding night, right? So that dream definitely foreshadows the dream that I talked about last class that he has right after the creation of the creature definitely foreshadows that event. It kind of brings back to the idea too of sex and death, right? Whenever you talk about sex and death, right, those two things are oftentimes intertwined. I mean, if you think about like slasher films like Friday the 13th, right? Who does Jason usually kill in the films? Right? People having sex.
The virgins usually get away.
What is it?
The virgins are usually the ones that always get away.
Right. They're the final girl, right? The virgins.
No, there's always a cue. Like you see boobs in a horror movie, somebody's getting ready to die.
Right.
That's always a cue. You're like, oh no, they're by a fireplace and they're getting warm. They're getting, it's about to go down.
Yeah, the reason why that association is there is especially the male orgasm, right, is associated with death, right? I thought that's almost like it's associated with that, right? Like ejaculation is deemed as like a mini death. Right? That's why that association is there.
Didn't they call it that in like, was it France maybe? They called it they called the orgasm the little death or something like that. That's like a historical thing. They actually said that. I always thought that was so strange.
Right.
But I guess it's like it's quick and it's over with. This big event that lasts for like 7 seconds and then gone.
Think about all the sperm that die, right, every time, right? So I can see why that would be associated with that. Yeah, it's interesting how the book does that, right? The whole death on the wedding day, right? Wedding day associated with sexuality, right? The fact that the Victor creates without sexuality. I think all that's tied together in a nice little bow in this book.
Do you think that when Mary Shelley wrote it, do you think that she meant for all those things to be tied together? Or do you think it was like, I just wrote a really good story and everybody's like, oh, well, check
She
this
was-
out. Check this out.
She was very thoughtful and bright person, right? I think she was very well read. So, right, I think everything that's in here she probably meant to be talked about. Right? Sometimes you can make a case like, are we overanalyzing a book? Right? Is we're making too much of it? Should we just enjoy the story for what it is? The classic question of are we overanalyzing things? I wouldn't say so with Shelley. Like I said, she was very well read, and one of to write this at 18 years old, right? One of the greatest minds ever, I think.
I guess there's certain artists and certain authors, that without a shadow of a doubt, you can't overanalyze. She's probably one of them. Like, I don't think it's possible to overanalyze C.S. Lewis or Tolkien. Those guys, you could dive into stuff with them for centuries. And she's probably like that too. But somebody like R.L. Stein, like the Goosebumps books, like you're not going to pull a whole lot of philosophy out of the thing under the sink or something like that.
Slappy the puppet, right, from Goosebumps. Yeah, I think all the stuff we've talked about in this class, right, raises these philosophical types of questions. But you can also read them literally, right? Like in the birthmark or the minister's black veil, right? You can just read that as like a creepy guy wearing a veil, right? The story would be complete, right?
I think it's the same thing with It's Hard to Find a Good Man. Like, if it wouldn't have been for his rambling at the end of the story, if she would have cut out like probably 8 sentences, it would have just been a good story. You know what I mean? But just throwing that little bit in there,
That little bit of philosophy.
that little tiny speech that he had, it makes you change your whole perspective of the story from just a family that got shot on the side of the road to, oh, was he really that bad of a guy? Like,
Yeah, that story is a masterclass of storytelling. I would definitely recommend you guys read more O'Connor. All of her stuff is good.
Did you ever look at that link I emailed you?
I still haven't yet. I've been meaning to. About
Yeah.
her being racist.
There was a couple quotes. There really wasn't nothing like of her directly saying anything racist. It was like things of her associated with the Klan and stuff like that in the 40s or 50s, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that out. Yeah, well, I'll end our class today by saying congratulations, guys. You got through your first graphic or Gothic novel here. And so last week, most of you all thought last week, most of you guys liked the novel more than the short story as a form for this. So it'll be interesting to see how this discussion progresses over our next 2 novels that we're going to read. So,
what comes after Dracula again?
The Haunting of Hill House.
Okay, gotcha.
So we're doing 2 Brit novels and then a famous American novel, right? Haunting of Hill House.
So we're going into Dracula right now.
Yeah,
After
Dracula is up next. I need to look through it again to divvy up like where to stop for each day and all that stuff. So I'll get back in touch with you guys tomorrow when I get back to my office and can break my copy out. So I'll let you know where you need to stop and all of that. Next week, I might actually kind of do like I did with Frankenstein and just have you do one. I might just have you do 1 post next week instead of 2. Like we'll read a big chunk to get us started. And then the week after that, we'll kind of break it up into smaller chunks. So that's probably how I'll approach it next week. We'll read a big chunk to get started. And then the week after, we'll break it up. We will have to break it up. We'll probably have to break Dracula up into maybe probably, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, maybe even like into a 3rd week, because it's a pretty long book. It's a lot longer than Frankenstein. So I might have to kind of divvy it up into some smaller chunks over the next couple of weeks. So I'll figure out how I'm going to divvy it up tomorrow when I'm at the office. Okay.
I've got a paper question real quick.
Go ahead.
On the MLA format or on the prompt paper, it says to refer to the Blackboard citation and quotation tool. Where is that at? Can anybody tell me where that's at?
Let me show you have I showed you guys the template before that I want you to use?
Yeah, you showed us the template. I'm not real sure on whenever I start a quotation in the story how it's supposed to be formatted. And I didn't know if that tool showed you how to do it.
I'll show you how to do it right now. Might as well. I use that same prompt for all my classes, so I might not have given you a guide. So let me just do that real quick. So in your papers, whenever you guys are quoting, you usually kind of want to give an introduction to your quote. So you might say something like, the misfit said to grandma, quote. Right, so when you do it that way, all that you have to put, so the way that you do it, you would put that it comes from O'Connor's story, page number. So like if you read the story from a PDF and it has a page number, you put the page number there. Right, so maybe the page number was like 52 or something. Right, so you would say 50, you'd say O'Connor 52.
Okay, I'm glad you showed me the parentheses because I was saying like on page, 37, so and so said, and then we lead into it that way. So that's a lot easier to do it that way.
You can also introduce the author in the sentence too. You can say something like O'Connor's misfit said grandma, quote. And then if you introduce the author in a sentence, all you would have to do in that case in the parentheses would be to put the 52. Because it's understood from the sentence that you're quoting from O'Connor's story. So I'm guessing most of you all will probably only talk about 1 or 2 authors in your papers. So the only time that you have to give these tags like this is when you change authors, when you're changing your quotes. Maybe you go from one story to the next. That's the only time that you have to kind of do that. So you don't have to put like O'Connor 52, O'Connor 38, O'Connor 46. You don't have to always put the name if you're citing from her multiple times in a row. So if your whole paper is about a good man, it's hard to find. You really only have to do that once. After that, all you have to do is put the page number for wherever you found your quote. So that's pretty much how that works. Okay. Later in the class, when you do research papers, maybe you'll have 5 or 6 articles that you're quoting from. You have to keep track of that more. But for this, it's probably understood you're quoting from just Poe or Hawthorne or Lovecraft or whoever, right? So you don't have to constantly cite like that. You can just put the page. If you cite the same person over and over, just change whatever the page number is. That's all you got to do. Okay. As far as leading into a quote, I always do recommend that you lead into a quote kind of like that. You don't ever want to start a sentence out with a quote. It's better style to introduce the quote, kind of like how I did here. The colon's usually a nice, fancy, grammatical way to do that. Instead of using a comma there, use a colon. Right? Colons don't have much of a purpose, but they're good for that. Right? So use your colons to introduce your quotes. Right? You say, remember, this is really all you got to do. You don't have to have a works cited page unless you're borrowed something from the internet somewhere. I'm telling you guys, you don't have to do that. So you don't have to have a works cited page or anything. This is really the only thing you got to do as far as quoting. Anything else I can address about papers or anything? We still got 15 minutes, and I'll be happy to address any concerns here. Yeah, I think I said it's due Friday, right? Friday is when I said it's due. You guys can take your time on it. Get them in by Monday if you want. I'll give you through the whole rest of the weekend to do it. So you can turn them in Monday. I'll extend the deadline out a little bit. I've got 2 other classes full of papers I got to do this weekend anyway, so I wouldn't get through them right away anyway. So take your time, breathe a little. You can get them in on Monday. Okay. Make sure it's the best possible paper you can submit, right? So use that extra time and polish it up real nice. Make sure there's no errors. Look out for things like comma splices and run-ons. Right? All of you guys will probably have different levels of expertise with making like grammar mistakes and things like that. So that's always interesting to see in 102. See how much 101 actually helps you with that type of thing.
I'm seeing on my app when I logged into Blackboard today that it said that some courses are having a problem with our assignment submissions. So right now all I have is my iPad until I get my computer looked at again. So I was going to see if I could try to submit my assignment when I get it done to Blackboard, and if you don't get it, I'll see. Can I send it to you in an email?
Yeah, you can send it to me both ways if you want to be on the safe side.
Okay. Because I ran into that with my speech class, so we ended up having to email it to him.
Yeah, so submit it to me both ways if you want to be on the safe side. That's no problem. So yeah, take up to the weekend. Once I grade them, we might have another like little writing workshop just to see if I notice some common problems and things like that before your next one. So I'll try to grade them pretty quickly so that you guys can kind of see what's going good with your writing, what's going wrong. It's mostly been a lit class so far, but it's also a writing class. So once you do this first paper, I'll get a good sense as far as things you're doing right, things you can improve on, all that. And I will let you revise the first paper. I will let you revise it. So if, in case you get a grade you don't like the first time, I will let you revise this one. All right, just because there hasn't been a lot of writing instruction so far. That's why this is kind of a good gauge for me to see where you are as a writer. So let's say it don't go so smooth the first time, you will get a chance to redo it. Okay. But don't use that as an opportunity to turn in something crap, right? Knowing it's crap, then, oh, he'll let me fix it later. Don't do that, right? Give me your best effort. Then even if you get like a B and have to fix it up a little bit to get an A, right? That's a lot easier than fixing up the D and trying to make it an A. You see what I mean? Give it your all the first time. Okay. So don't stress. Do your best. We'll see how it looks when I grade them. Okay. It's hard for me to get a gauge for your writing, reading discussion boards, right? Because they're a little bit different than an actual paper. So I'll be interested to see where you guys are. But yeah, take your time. So work on that and start Dracula for next week. Okay. I'll tell you guys where to stop for next Wednesday's Zoom tomorrow. Remember, Dracula is a little different. Remember, it's written in letters and diaries and correspondences and things like that. So Dracula might throw you off for a little bit of a loop because the way that it's written, it's all these different things pieced together, right? So I'll definitely be interested to hear what you all have to say about that for next time. So keep up with the different characters, keep up with who's writing whatever journal entry, right? Sometimes students reading Dracula get a little confused. So long as you keep up with who's telling what at any time, right, you guys will be fine. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I love it. I love Dracula. I probably like it more than Frankenstein. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say.
When was Dracula written?
Frankenstein was written in the 18 teens. Dracula was in the 1890s. So Dracula was well after Frankenstein.
Does it take place in the 1890s or does it take place way back when?
In the 1890s.
That's crazy because I've always had I've just always had this idea that it took place like around medieval times or after medieval times or something. I don't know. I guess it's because of the setting. Like everything you see in movies, it's like that castle setting, and so I thought it was way older.
A lot of what I just talked about with things like British imperialism and the way they look at other cultures as being exotic and stuff. You guys will see a lot of that with like Transylvania in Dracula, right? You'll so pay attention to that as you read. You'll definitely see a lot of that. Yeah, but and of course, Dracula's character in the book, he actually has lived since then, right? Since the medieval times, but the book takes place in the 1890s. They'll go back to London. The book will start out in Transylvania, and then they'll eventually go back to London. So great read. If you guys, there's lots of Dracula films and things like that too. But with Dracula, it's the same thing as Frankenstein. They changed the stories up so much that it's hard to find one that's pretty accurate with the book. And so you can't watch the movie and substitute to the book because there's not really a movie that comes close. But I'll definitely talk film adaptations and things like that with you all next week too. Great Netflix show about Dracula, by the way. The Netflix miniseries. It's a 3-part miniseries. It puts a fun spin on it. So if you wanted to watch anything in combination with reading the book, I would recommend that. Okay.
What'd you say it's called?
I think on Netflix, I think it's just called Dracula.
Oh, just Dracula.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it came out last year in 2020. So yeah, it's 3 parts. So it's different than the book, but it's a nice spin on the book. So if you want to watch something alongside reading it, I would recommend it. All right, so we'll call it a night there, I suppose. And we'll see you all next time. So enjoy your weekends. Good luck finishing up your papers.
Hang on.
I think
Here-
Cassidy, I think I was still gonna hang around and talk to you. I think, wasn't I? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
After recording stops, I'll let you guys meet the baby.